Hi everyone. In this video we're going to be talking about a little bit different of a topic, and it's going to be on how to walk bass lines. So this video is specifically meant for bass players first, but also if you're a piano player that wants to learn how to walk bass lines and be able to play with two hands independently, or say if you're a member of a jazz ensemble of some type where you don't have a bass player available and a keyboard player is needed to walk bass lines for the group, then this is the video for you. The information I'd like to talk about in this video I wouldn't necessarily consider groundbreaking at all. Really, walking bass lines can be broken down into very simple steps. And that's precisely what I'm going to talk about today, is how we master anything. It doesn't matter if it's music related or athletic or intellectual, whatever. You take every goal or every piece of information and break it down into its most basic steps, and you master them from the ground up. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So the whole premise of walking bass lines relates to this concept of movement in music and in jazz. Getting from one place to the other, harmonically speaking, is the job of the bass player. And not just in jazz, but in music in general. Hundreds of years ago, when you think about music of Bach, like in Brandenburg concertos, where there's some sort of basso continuo going on, really walking bass lines historically is counterpoint, and it's not much different. We're taking a predetermined set of chord changes, and essentially what we're doing is we're taking what we know in order to play a melody that helps to outline harmony. So that's a really good way to think of it. We're trying to play a melody that outlines harmony. So I'd like to talk about where to start with this, and we're going to just use a blues in the key of F. So the first step with this is really simple. If you already know the chord changes to blues, then that's great. If you know the chord progression to a basic blues, then all you're going to do first is either on a piano, if you're a piano player, or even if you're a bass player, if you want to start on piano, if it helps you visualize things better, that's perfectly fine too. But whether it's a piano or a bass, just start off by playing whole notes. And as boring as it is, it's a step that's necessary. So whenever there's a chord change, you're just playing whole notes. So for F blues, that would look like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. Back at the top of the form. It's pretty simple, but it's a step that's part of this idea of taking everything and breaking it down to its most basic elements and mastering it from the ground up. Then from there, what you can do is play half notes. And then the question becomes, well, what do I use for that second note? Well, that can be answered in a variety of ways. In bass lines, in general, are you playing mostly roots? Yes. But another question is, do I play only roots? And the answer is most certainly not. If we're walking bass lines in a measure of 4/4, when there's 4 quarter notes, and if we already play the root at for one of those 4 quarter notes, we have to fill up the rest of the measure with something. So it makes sense that we're not just playing only roots here. But for this next step, it makes the most sense to me to play half notes. So now we're playing twice as much. But I like to have people practice when they're learning how to walk bass lines, just focusing on scale degree 1 and scale degree 5, or whatever the chord changes are. So for instance, for the first chord change, for F7, we know we can play the root, obviously, or scale degree 1 of our chord change. But I like to have people practice playing the 5th scale degree. So for F7, that would be the note C. And the reason why I like to have people start with this, it's a good beginning step in beginning to successfully outline the harmony, but without being defined. Because when you hear, 1 to 5 like this, is it major necessarily? Is it minor? So it's just a good next step for this. So let me demonstrate. So this would be walking a chorus, or not fully walking, but playing just half notes over the form and chord changes of the blues using 1s and 5s. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So there you go. I just used scaled 1 and scale degree 5 of whatever chord change that I was on. And you noticed, I think I did it at least once, you noticed that I repeated some notes. I think I did something like... And for this step in the process, repeating notes is perfectly okay. If you're struggling to find scale degrees 1 and 5, you can use that as kind of a safety point. And also, there seems to be this idea with bass players that repeating notes isn't necessarily ideal. And there is some truth to that, and I don't think there is some truth to that, because a lot of bass players, especially when they're playing at really, really fast tempos, maybe like quarter note equals 290 or faster, where the hand-to-brain signal isn't as quick as it is for medium or slower tempos, so some bassists like to repeat notes. And sometimes that adds for a certain desired effect for tension and release and all these other things. So the bottom line is, don't be afraid to repeat notes, whether it's in one of these beginning elementary stages for building towards walking 4 quarter notes, but don't be afraid to repeat notes. It's perfectly fine. So what do you do after that? After you've added or become comfortable with using just 1s and 5s, then you can start to add in thirds. So if still keeping it at half notes, that would look something like this. A 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's just an example of that. I used mainly 1s and 5s and also thirds, depending on what the root of the chord change I was on was. And when you're practicing this, don't be afraid to make mistakes. And in this step of the process, it's way better to put just a note in there that you're not entirely sure of will work, and I use that term loosely, just to keep the rhythmic aspect going, and just being able to play one half note after the other without stopping or taking extra space before going on to the next one. So where can we go from there? Well, going back to what I mentioned about, because we have a span of 4 quarter notes that we're dealing with, it's almost inevitable that we have to use things more than roots. And I think I'm going to save that for the next video to talk about where we go from here. So after you're comfortable with just playing whole notes over the form, and then half notes using mainly 1s and 5s, and then adding 3s when you're comfortable, move on to the next video and I'll talk about different ways that you can move from one place to another. Thanks.